Assalamu alaikum, my name is Michael Dighton. I'm a revert Muslim. I was born in Christchurch in 1971. I was raised in a pretty standard Kiwi household. We did go to church. We had a Christian based outlook on life. The family stopped going to church maybe when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and from that point on there wasn't a lot of religious instruction or anything like that, so I had just what you'd probably call a standard white person Kiwi upbringing in Christchurch during the 1970s. My parents were progressive in the sense that they always tried to give us opportunities to meet people from different cultures. So I met several Muslim people in the very early 1980s, probably the Malaysians from Canterbury University might have been the first people I met, engineering students, but we met a lot of different people from different cultures. So when I met Muslims, I was always impressed by their demeanour, the way they had an outlook on life, the way they looked at people in a humanistic way. I was always impressed by them and by education as well, because they were always very well educated. So I always had a positive outlook towards Muslims. There was never any kind of negativity at all in my experience. There were so few Muslims in Christchurch in the 70s and 80s that really there wasn't enough people to even really cause friction. So I only had positive outlook on Islam and Muslims right from the get-go. So when I made a more profound contact with Muslims after March 15, it was very easy for me to translate from my own experience earlier to where I am now. For me, without doubt, the March 15 event was a defining event. I did not know a huge number of Christchurch Muslim people before March 15, but I knew several. And my friend Roshan's father was one of the people who was martyred on March 15. So I knew the moment that there were shootings at the masjid that Haji was probably already dead. So immediately had a very profound effect on me. But when it first happened, you have a feeling of powerlessness. There's nothing much you can really do. So after the second night, what I would do every evening and into the night would be to walk from my house through Hagley Park and to outside the Al-Noor Masjid, as close as you can get with the police cordon. And I did that every night for about 10 days after their shooting. So it was just a compulsion. I felt like I had to do it. No one told me to or anything like that. I just felt like I needed to be close to Al-Noor, and I couldn't really explain to you at the time why, but it was a very, very strong feeling. And when I went there was very rarely were there other Kiwis. There were some Kiwis there. Mostly it was police officers. And so I had a lot of talk of a spiritual nature to some of the police men and women that were standing guard, and that first week was just a period of just not knowing what to do. But when the call went out for everybody in Christchurch that wanted to go to the funerals, I was really keen to go. The Thursday, the first lot of funerals, unfortunately, I was still dealing with anxiety, and I had an anxiety attack that morning and didn't go, and I felt really guilty. The next day, there was a ceremony at Hagley Park, and the invitation went out again to go to the funerals, and I went that time in the bus with a whole lot of other Muslim people and just started talking to them and just immediately felt at home. So I went to the funerals, we went through the funeral services, and it was at the funeral service that I met my brother Muhammad Noor, who I teamed up with, who's a Muslim from Hamilton, and together we started going out and visiting people that had been injured. We started visiting people in their homes, and we sort of made a base at the Hagley Park Refugee Centre, which is actually Canterbury Cricket's place where they have all their events. So they gave the hall to the Muslim community to use for about 2 or 3 weeks after the shootings, and that's where I spent most of my time after that, hanging out with Muslim people, talking to them about their lives, about their faith, and about my ideas of faith and my ideas about God, and finding not to my surprise, but somewhat to my surprise, that almost everything that I'd come to believe about God was exactly how Muslim people feel about God. So our ideas of paradise, our ideas of Allah, our ideas of angels. I never knew that other religions even knew about jinn. I just assumed that was something that I knew that other people didn't. So a lot of these things, to my surprise and amazement, turned out to be just part of Islam. So in those few weeks, there was a very profound change in me. I realised suddenly I was around people that I could just immediately relate to and immediately have very meaningful conversations with. And Muhammad Noor spent 2 weeks in Christchurch, then he went back home to Hamilton. He came back, I think it was in June, and that's when I did Shahada at Linwood Mosque and became Muslim. But I knew he was going to ask me. Other people had said, about becoming a Muslim, and I just said, look, it's going to wait for Noor to come because he was the person who introduced me to Islam. And so when he came back, I immediately did Shahada and became Muslim. Well, I was quite nervous, I have to admit, and my anxiety by this stage was much, much lower, but just an incredible feeling of emotions, it's very hard to put into words what the emotions really are, because they're so strong, and like, if I think about it, you almost start tearing up. But it was just a profound feeling of peace and security, and also being loved by a whole bunch of people. Even though I didn't know a lot of these people well, I knew that they had only the best of intentions to me, and so it was really just a profound feeling of peace, to be honest. That was really it. But it's very hard to put into words because these aren't things you feel every day. These are very strong emotions that sometimes only come out in very, very bad situations. So it was very strong reaction, but to put it into words is difficult. But I would say peace is probably the word. When you think about what Salah means, that's how I felt at the time. Very, very good. And most of my friends are atheists or totally not interested in religion, so they were like, oh yeah, that's fine, and just carried on. It really didn't make much difference. My mum, on the other hand, I rang her and I said, I've got something to tell you, Mum. And I said, but I don't want to tell you over the phone. I'm going to come up to Nelson and tell you. So I drove up to Nelson, and as soon as I got out of the car, she said, you've become a Muslim. She knew when I said that. So I wouldn't say they were confused. They were just happy that I was happy. For non-Muslims, I don't know if it makes a huge difference. I've never had negativity of any sort whatsoever, none. But to be honest, I think it goes over most non-Muslims' heads what really happened. Unless you've been through that process, it's just, I don't know how much of a meaning it has, but parents were supportive, but not overly. So yeah, I was just sort of left to my own devices. I think I'm the sort of person that does things which I believe to be correct, and I do things in my own way. I'll always answer to corrections and such, but I've always had my own mind, so when I choose to do something, I don't think anyone was particularly surprised that I would choose to do something like that. If anyone that knows me well knows that spiritual ideas are actually at the top of my mind most of the time, if you really get to know me. So parents were not particularly surprised. My dad just didn't really care that much. He still kept asking me if I wanted to have a drink with my meal and things like this. So I don't even know how much he noticed, but I shouldn't be cruel. That's probably unfair. They just didn't really probably understand really what becoming a Muslim actually is. So unless you've gone through that or know Muslim culture, I don't know how much other people really get it. Certainly if I tell Muslim people, then it's a very big deal. And I've been told how lucky I am many times being a revert Muslim. So for Muslims, it's definitely a big deal. For non-Muslims, not so much. They live in Nelson now, so I only see them maybe 2 or 3 times a year. When I'm there, I just go off into my room and pray. I don't do anything in front of them. I don't think they don't think they really see that much difference. They know that if there's not a Nelson's so small, there's not a full-time masjid there, but they have a Methodist church that's used when there's enough people there to have a service. So I will go there as well if there's people going. But for them, no, I don't think it's. They're not young anymore, so the idea of change is probably a little bit hard for them. But I don't honestly think it's made much more of a difference to tell Muslim people that I've become a revert than it is for them. Dad stopped asking me if I want a glass of wine with my meals now, which is nice, and they obviously know that other things I won't do. But apart from that, no. Broadly, I'm the same person to them as I was before. I think it's fair to say. Like any good parent, they want their son to be happy and fulfilled in their life and such. So they could tell straight away that I'll tell you one thing if you like. This is how much I forgot myself during the 2 or 3 weeks I was at the Hagley Centre. One day, out of the blue, my mum rang me up, and she said, "Oh, I'm really sorry. I didn't ring you." And I said, "Why? Why are you sorry?" And she said, "It's your birthday." And I had actually not realised that it was actually my birthday. I'd become so lost in this and so become so much of a part of this amazing community that I had forgotten that I even had my birthday. So when I'm with Muslim people and Muslim community, it's just, I don't know, it just feels better for me. I just know it's better for me to be around Muslim people. I just feel safer around Muslim people. So when I'm out in the non-Muslim world, I'm more or less the same like I was before, with a few exceptions, obviously. But when I'm with the Muslim people, then that's where I'm really in me. That satisfies me. Yeah. So what can Islam offer to everybody? First of all, we have an amazing community. So for me, the thing that drew me into Islam was the people. The practice of being a Muslim, almost all of it I found really, really easy. I'd already stopped drinking alcohol, I'd already stopped doing a lot of things. I had to modify my diet a little bit, but not by much. For me personally, I think the best thing it does is it gives your mind discipline. I found praying 5 times a day dreadfully difficult at the start. I'd forget. Once I started putting on my phone, it was easier, but I found that hard. But what I've discovered is that and fasting, it very much disciplines your mind. So I think for young people today in a world that's just so weird and so many people have ideas, to have something really sure in your life that's solid and doesn't change at all, that's a very, very secure and good feeling to have. And I think a lot of people in this world don't have that feeling at all. So I would say it's a combination of the feeling of security plus the feeling of being in a really positive community that you can understand. It's funny actually, definitely things I didn't expect happened. So I became a lot less interested in like mass media and entertainment and things like that. It's not that I became more serious, I just found that those things just weren't interesting to me anymore. So I guess I'm much more focused on people now than I used to be. I'm just trying to think what else in my life would be radically different. What Islam's done for me is it's just regulated the day. The whole day has 5 parts and then an end. So I guess what it's done is just made my day-to-day life much easier and much easier to regulate. When March 15 happened, I was actually doing a residential course to deal with anxiety, and it made a massive help, and I wouldn't have probably even become a Muslim if it wasn't for that course, at least not then. So dealing with mental health issues, Islam is incredible. When I go to the masjid, you never have anxiety, you never have any negative feelings about anything, and being around Muslim people has the same effect on me. So being around Muslims by itself helps me a lot in my own mental health. And it's really, I have no mental health issues whatsoever. And I was getting massive panic attacks before March 15. and even during that period. But after, once I became part of an amazing community, I still get anxious. Everyone gets anxious about things, but I don't have that horrible, purposeless anxiety about something you don't even know what it is. You don't ever get that anymore. So it's the day-to-day regulation of my life is actually probably the best thing. It just means that everything just works seamlessly now. When March 15 happened, I was doing this anxiety course, and the one thing I got out of that was it made me realise I have to treat people more kindly. I have to, instead of seeing somebody acting out and telling them, no, stop doing that, instead of doing that, I would be much more likely to approach them and say, is something going wrong? Is there something I can help you with? And that works well for an anxiety, but it works even better when you become a Muslim, because now, because of our understanding of how we get credit for all of the things that we do. I was always looking out to help people if I could. I like helping people, it's fun and it makes you feel good. But Islam spells it out very clearly, and it's really great to teach kids this idea of just try and be looking out to help somebody out. Allah will always reward you if you do these things. Even to people that have no interest in religion, that's a really positive thing for any child to learn and for any adult to put into practice. So if you just follow being just a good Muslim, you are always going to have a good life. That's how I see it. If you want to look at a life where someone went astray, then you could definitely look at my life, because I did some really dumb things when I was young. And I always believed in God, but I did all sorts of stupid things. So anyone that goes astray in your life, it's never too late to change. It's only too late. Once you're dead, it's too late. But before that, you always have a chance to change yourself. Whether you're a Muslim that's straight off the straight and narrow path, or if you've never known anything about religion, you've always got that chance to gain eternity if you really want to. Now, religious instruction at schools can't really be done. Schools don't really allow that, but we do need something in New Zealand society to at least show young people that there is another side to life, that there's a spiritual dimension to everything we do. So it'd be nice to see some sort of just very basic spiritual instructions given to kids, but unfortunately we don't allow that. So all you can do is go out into the world and just demonstrate what being a good Muslim is, and just show people just by demonstration what Islam is about. One of the things I was told before I actually became Muslim, when I was at the Hagley Centre, many Muslims said to me, "You'll never see the media the same way again." So I was like, okay, that's fair enough. I spent 3 weeks at the Muslim Centre. I was around, an incredibly awful thing happened, but the spirit of the community at that centre was absolutely amazing. It was all positive, it was all loving, and it was all looking to the future. So it was only positive. And then after 3 weeks, I went home and watched the news for the first time in 3 weeks. And the first thing that was on the 6 o'clock news was about March 15. And it was all doom and it was all gloom and how awful it was for everybody. And I just realised, it's so easy to get a misimpression about a situation unless you're really in it. We learn history out of books, but all we learn are sort of points, little points. We don't actually have the whole overview. So if you looked at March 15 just from the media's perspective, it would have been only bad. But if you looked at it from the community perspective, it was incredible, it was positive, and it was all good. So you do have to be careful the way you look and frame any event, especially something like March 15, because it was absolutely appalling and awful. But from that appalling and awful event, we have already gained huge amounts of positivity. We have shown, first New Zealand, how amazing Islam is. We've shown the Islamic world overseas how Muslims in a very bad situation can behave exemplary and really just show the whole world how great Islam really is. And it's given, hopefully anyway, it's given young people that may not have ever thought about any kind of religious ideas, and might make them ask a question, which would be something like, how can these people with all this terrible things happening still be so positive and still be so loving? If you can make someone ask themselves that question, then maybe you can go to the next step and actually start talking to them about what faith really is and everything that goes with it. So, crisis brings opportunity, I guess is what that boils down to. And we may not have done the very best out of the opportunity we've got, but most of us anyway, really tried to bring something positive out of March 15. We owe it to those that were martyred, we owe it to everybody who's left afterwards, and we owe it to Islam, to Muslims, to really make every attempt we can to turn something negative into a positive. And I believe we have. I really do. I do a lot of volunteering now compared to what I used to do, and a lot of that is simply because I'm a Muslim now. And I've found relationships with other faith groups have improved incredibly. I was quite antagonistic towards most Christians once. Now I only relate to them in a positive way. Christians are always interested in what Muslims, in Christchurch anyway, have always been very interested that I've dealt with about Islam. So I get a lot of questions from Christians now, and they're always good questions. So I think overall, we've just been trying to demonstrate how to behave when things go wrong, and I think mostly we've done a good job. I was always a relatively independent person, but one thing I did feel when I became Muslim is that you've moved out of one group, Pākehā Kiwi, and you're moving to another group, Muslim or revert Muslim, and at some point in that movement you're sort of caught right in the middle, and you're not quite sure whether you're a revert Muslim or a Kiwi who's a revert Muslim or what else. You do. There's definitely a point where you have you have to question exactly what your place is in all of this society. So that was definitely a thing. I had quite a lot of anxiety about that. I definitely had anxiety about praying properly and general Islamic practice, but in terms of the faith and all of the teachings of Islam, everything is, I've never had any problems there whatsoever. Everything has been always been interesting, and it's always been a revelation to me. So it's really in the more basic nuts and bolts stuff. I've got no problem with giving up pork or anything like that. That was easy. Alcohol had already done that. It's really just just basic day-to-day stuff that first definitely I found difficult. First thing is you really need to talk to actual Muslims. I mean, you could look online, and that is totally fine for some things like praying times and how to do the basic prayers and things. But I think for if you have real questions, you need to talk to a Muslim person who, and as a born Muslim, I would not suggest you necessarily go to a revert. I would go to somebody who is, and that means you have to either, if you don't know someone, you'll have to go to the masjid and ask, because there's always going to be questions you're going to have to ask yourself. But just be patient, be kind on yourself. You're going to make mistakes, and don't sweat that too much. As long as they're honest mistakes, it's never a problem. And just be patient, because it does take time. You don't instantly go from one to the other. I've never had an opportunity to sort of mix those two groups together. I've never actually done that. So it'd be interesting to know I would say almost certainly, because the sort of people that I was friends with are vaguely similar to me, I would say it would actually be a really great meeting. That would be really interesting. We should definitely do that sometime. But I've never done that. At first, I felt sort of like I was a Kiwi playing a role of a Muslim, and then as time went on, that feeling of, I wouldn't call it imposter syndrome, but that feeling of sort of being slightly not quite right, that just disappears, and you just got to keep doing it and doing it, and you know, being able to recite basic scripture, at least being able to recite Surah Al-Fatiha. That once you can do that, then that helps a lot. Because then you've at least got one prayer you can go straight to and not have to feel silly about. But I think just be patient and don't try and rush things. Just do it at the pace that you feel, because unless it's authentically really who you are, it won't last long. You might be able to keep it up for a year or two, but it won't work. So you have to really and truly want to do it, obviously, but then just try and spend as much time around Muslims as you can. Very much like to see Islam become more popular in New Zealand. Everybody that I know that's become a revert has found it's improved their life in some, at least in many ways usually. I would love to see more faith in New Zealand. I know there's a huge number of people that do believe in Allah that are either too embarrassed or for some other reason won't express their faith in any kind of public way. So it would be nice to kind of encourage people to come out of the woodwork and just say, look, I believe in God, I believe in Allah. You don't have to make a big deal about it. I think it's easy to think that, you know, New Zealand's more or less an atheist country now, but it's not. There are heaps of people of faith, they just don't tell people about it anymore. So if we could encourage just basic conversations around what it means to have faith in God and what it means to have a faith community, that would be wonderful. But I'd love to see a huge increase in Muslims in New Zealand. It could only be good for New Zealand. It would really be great. I've got a lot of Māori friends who are Muslim, and Māori culture and Islamic culture are very, very, very similar. So that works really well. I think, yeah, I would just love to see Islam become more popular overall. And I would really love to see the New Zealand government bring more migrants in from Muslim countries. That would really be great. We need to massively increase the population of New Zealand to get a reasonable economy of scale. So I think the Muslim countries would be perfect for New Zealand. The more we can get, the better. So that's what I'd love to see as well, is a combination of more people becoming reverts, but also more actual Muslims from other countries coming. That would be great.